Right, of course, that's the release of our discussion this morning. We're going to talk more about the elephants and what's the big event that's happening on Saturday, where 105 tons of ivory and 1.35 tons of rhino horn will be set ablaze, which is supposed to be, which will be a final statement against poaching, which threatens to wipe out the remaining elephants and rhinos in the Kenyan wild. Perhaps, let me introduce you first. We have Jared Bosire, who is the Conservation Director at the WWF, and then we have Robert Kai. Yes, I got it right. Who is the Manager of Community Projects at Wildlife Direct. And so we are going to be talking about that. Perhaps, gentlemen, the first question would be then, how serious is this problem that we have in terms of ivory, and what statement is tomorrow going to set to the world? I'll start with you, John.
Thank you, Willis. I think that's a very important question in terms of... actually, two questions in one. One is, how serious is the problem? And what does the event tomorrow mean for the country and the world at large? Now, Kenya has had a thriving elephant population, the last about 30 years or so. Yeah, but because of poaching, there has been significant, reduction. In the, 70s, for instance, we had 167,000 elephants in the country, which came down to about 20,000 in the 90s. So the 80s was actually the dark moment, in the history of the country as far as elephant conservation was concerned. Yeah, so if you look at the reduction in elephant population, between those years, that goes to underscore how serious the problem has been. Of course, over the years, we have also had continued poaching. If you remember, about 3 or so years ago, we lost about 11 elephants in Savo at one moment, which was actually one family that was, eliminated. So poaching is not only a national crisis, it's actually a continental, it is a global problem. Yeah, so the problem is grave. I mean, if you look at continental figures, we are losing about 30,000 elephants each year. Can you imagine seeing 30,000 elephants dead each year? That is massive. So it's a serious problem. So what does the event for tomorrow mean? The event for tomorrow, and we want to appreciate, government for taking this bold step, is basically to indicate that illegal wildlife trade as a country is not an issue that is supported. It is to make a statement that ivory and rhino horns don't belong in markets. They should belong to animals. We are better off having ivory and rhino, horns on the animals than having them on our hands or on whatever in our houses. So the statement tomorrow, the message tomorrow is that rhino horns and elephant ivory must be on animals, on living animals, and not in our houses, or on ourselves in terms of, wildlife trophies. I think that is an important statement. This will be the largest ever ivory ban globally in terms of volumes, and we are having, important people, heads of states and other leaders coming along to witness this. Thank you. All
right, but also maybe, Robert, even as this happens tomorrow, of course, after tomorrow, yes, we'll make history, as Jared has said, and which is a plus for Kenya, all these dignitaries coming. But what, in your view, do you think that after, the war doesn't end tomorrow? It is a statement that we are strong in the war, but it doesn't end tomorrow. So what do you think are some of the steps that should be taken? Because we find that, like he says, they belong on the animal, but for those that end up on the wrists, end up in the houses, they fetch good money for these people.
Well, I would say ivory belongs to elephants, yes, but there's ivory that's already in possession of, traders and all that. What the government is trying to do is just setting up precedents to make sure that, to let the world know that this thing is worthless, and the government went further to give out an amnesty period for everybody who has ivory to hand in the same ivory, piece of ivory to KWS officers. So it means that every the whole idea is trying to make the world or any ivory processor know that it's valueless. It's actually shame. If you go to the ban, you will actually see the marks on the ivory tusk where the choppings or where the fangas were just cutting up, and it's a shame. We're trying to make everybody feel ashamed that they own it, and not actually in a bad way, but it used to be valued by whoever used to value it, but now this thing has lost meaning because is coming from our dead animals, which we so much relate to, which we share almost 90% of everything, emotions, way of working out, and elephants and human beings are so close. So after the ban, we expect other countries to also to follow suit. Kenya is losing 88 elephants. It means that poaching has gone down by 80% according to statistics. But our neighboring country, Tanzania, is losing 10,000 elephants. So you can imagine, what if Tanzania and all other countries, East Africa countries, set the pace? That's what I think will follow after the ban. It will be an international, sequence from every country to we become, an example to everybody, and that's what we intend.
Yes.
Thank you, Robert. I think, Willis, you're asking a very important question. Something I've been thinking about since yesterday. What is it beyond the ban? After we ban 102 tons of ivory, tomorrow 1.35 tons of rhino horn. What is it beyond this great symbolic gesture? I think what will follow is even much more critical than the ban that we have tomorrow.
Yes.
And I want to be specific on a few, on a few actions. Some countries in the world have been able to manage to achieve zero poaching levels. What have they done right? One, we would want to see government, upping the game in terms of investigations to apprehend, prosecute, convict the kingpins who are behind this trade. If you look at the people who normally get arrested in relation to poaching, it is the poacher who goes to the field to kill the elephant. But behind these poachers are very rich, well-connected people in this country and across the world. We need to see a few of these guys, being arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. And I want to thank the government for the Wildlife Management and Conservation Act, which is levying very stiff penalties on people who are successfully prosecuted because of wildlife crime. If you are caught with wildlife trophies, it is 20 million Kenya shillings as a fine or life imprisonment. And this is the highest penalty provided for in law globally. But we have not been, as a country, we have not been able to have successful investigations, apprehension, prosecution, and conviction of the kingpins, the important people behind this trade. When we start arresting these people, and the government has the machinery to do competent investigations and arrest them, then we will say we are making progress as a country. That is one. And we want to see this happening, because when this happens, it becomes a deterrent measure. Secondly, why other countries have been able to, like Nepal has been able to achieve zero level poaching, is that they have invested a lot in a number of things. One, being able to do effective assessments to know how many animals do we have, in what place, in what state. Secondly, they have invested in technology. Because poaching has become sophisticated. People are using, modern technology to engage in this crime. We need to invest in technology. Thirdly, we need to provide, adequate human resource in terms of the rangers who patrol out there in our parks and doing a great job, and ensure that they have the tools that they need to have for them to do the job. Fourthly, we can't talk about successful wildlife management without effective community involvement. The role of the community is very, very important, knowing that in the country, about 70% of our wildlife is actually found outside protected areas. So community engagement becomes very key. What we have in Laikipia, now through organizations like the Northern Rangeland Trust, WWF and other partners working in the Mara to support establishment and development of conservancies where communities play an important role. Lastly, poaching is a transnational crime. It takes place across countries. So what this means that we need to collaborate, between neighboring countries. We are the source of wildlife trophies. We need to collaborate with countries which are destinations and markets for wildlife trophies. Those include China, Vietnam, and Thailand. These are the big guys in terms of providing, the markets. If we suppress the market as we work on the source, then we are going to disrupt, this illegal wildlife trade chain. So beyond the ban, I think we need to look at what can we do from a management policy perspective to actually enhance conservation and management?
Well, I think I could also add...
just before you add that, also just that as well, Jared has also mentioned something very important about the communities, because at the end of the day, it boils down to them. They're the ones who are there in the pathways, the migration routes and all that. So what should be done also to avoid that human-wildlife conflict that sometimes also leads to this, and also, like you mentioned about the poachers, as you make your point?
Well, first, I'll follow up on what you say.
Right.
Well, Kenya, to be honest, is the first country to set up a very strict law that governs wildlife management. Kenya, through the office of the DPP, which has been very useful, and the CJ, Mr. Mtunga, has set up a special, team of prosecutors, which is not happening in other country, to just deal with wildlife crimes. Kenya, again, through the various campaigns, through NGOs and civil society, has made sure, has ensured that Interpol report or put on notice to all Kenyans the first 8 big pins, ivory traders, which one of them happens to be a Kenyan who was caught in 2012. You must have heard about Faisal Mohammed. So I think the structures are there. What is lacking yet is the enforcement of the structures, the endorsement of the law of the Wildlife Act by the communities. And yes, talking about the communities, human-wildlife conflict. Actually, recently, human-wildlife conflict has become one of the greatest causes of elephant deaths in this country. Why? Because the community feel intimidated by conservation. Community feel left out. Communities feel that the law that was passed in 2013 is just another document. If we have these structures in place, if we have the compensation scheme, the law iterates that there should be county wildlife compensation committees, which should be dealing with the community issues, compensation issues on the ground. They are not yet in place. They are not yet working because there was delay in various management issues like appointment of the committee members and all that. If we have all these structures put in place, Kenya is not lacking the manpower. Kenya is not lacking the skill to enhance conservation. We just, in my opinion, are lacking a public interest. We have a Kenya that is concerned about what happens after the ban. How many other campaigns besides the Hands Off Our Elephants campaign by Wildlife Direct will come up? How many Kenyans will be concerned to say what is the trend of the new stockpiles? Do we even have to garner some more stockpiles? If we have a country that citizens that are angry enough to follow up like any other issues, then I think that's everything starts with passion, I believe, and that's the beginning of our success.
Do you think then, Jared, that Kenyans are not as concerned as they should be? And is it because maybe we are not painting that dire picture for them? Or do you think they're involved enough in this?
I want to use a specific example. Thank you, Willis. Let's remember the death of Mohawk a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah, because sometimes we may judge ourselves too harshly. I think the public appreciates the importance of our natural heritage. That is why you have so many Kenyans going to our national parks, to appreciate the rich natural endowments that we have as a country. Yeah, but of course, environmental awareness is always an ongoing activity. It's continuous, to sensitize and let the public know what are the dangers that we are facing right now, and what can we do as the public. Coming back to the issue of communities, for instance, I think as we talk about wildlife conservation and management, community involvement becomes very important, because if you look at the places where communities are living with or interacting with wildlife, what we want to see as we promote wildlife conservation and management, we want to see communities having equitable benefits, to proceeds that are coming out of conservation. Can communities actually get income, equitable income for availing their land for conservation? That is important. And when communities, get equitable benefits, they will appreciate the need to continue supporting, supporting conservation. So there's a lot, that we can do as a country, at the different levels. Community engagement is actually one of the greatest pillars in successful, natural resource management in whichever sector, whether it is wildlife, forestry, water, and etc. So a lot happening. The public is aware. Sensitization, campaigns can continue. Yeah, but that element of community engagement and especially them accessing benefits needs to be strengthened. We can do better. Yeah.
So also, I mean, we have the big story, of course, is the ivory and the rhino tomorrow, but there are also others, like you rightly mentioned there, Mohawk, and that case that has been there. So there is the issue of balancing also between development, because we need the roads, we need the infrastructure, and crossing that line in terms of eating into the the park, for example, and all that. So what do you think needs to be done in terms of in that regard, where we have to balance? We need development, yes, but then, like you said, and that's why this event is attracting so many people. It is very important. It's part of our national heritage.
Thank you, Willis. I think this is one of the most important questions you have asked this morning. Now, as a country, as we develop, we need to be clear about our development paradigm. Which kind of path do we want our development to take? Our country must develop. We must have jobs. We have to grow as a country. If you look at the rate of unemployment, it's appalling, and that encourages even crime. So as government, attracts these large-scale developments, whether it is in roads, railway, ports, and etc. This is great. Great opportunities for economic development, but the question is, how then do we get the balance between development and the conservation? And I want to use very specific examples. One time I was out of this country, in some country that I'm not going to name right now, and if you are in the West, where they experience winter, during the winter season, before you get out of your room, you need to check the weather and know what is the temperature today for you to be able to know how to dress. In this particular country where I was, before you get out of your room, you need to check what are the pollution levels outside, so that you can determine whether you are going out with a mask, because there has been very serious and grave environmental pollution. And there's a report. There's a report that
I think I know that country.
And I'm not going to give you the name. And there's a report that came out a few days ago about the huge environmental costs of this kind of development on this particular country. Because someone will have to pay for the environmental mess, that we create through development. Whether now or future generations. So as a country, how do we develop or assume a sustainable development trajectory? Government has come up with various policy and legal options on how to ensure that development is sustainable. If we have a huge project, that is taking place, the Environment Management and Coordination Act requires that we conduct strategic environmental assessments to be able to know what is the impact, long-term impact of this huge development on the environment, what are the risks, what are the options, what are the mitigating measures. This is where we don't do well as a country. To be honest, I have seen environmental impact assessment reports that are copy-paste, because consultants are making money. And NEMA needs to be very stringent on how EIAs and strategic environmental assessments are conducted. They need to be competent, they need to be responsive, and they need to provide for effective environment management plans. And I can use a specific example. We were having a case down at the coast of extracting sand from the sea to be used for construction of the standard gauge railway. The EIA that was done did not meet the minimum standards, and it's good to be very clear, as a country. The National Environment Tribunal listened to the case, and they actually found the EIA did not meet minimum standards, but it had been approved. Okay, so why was it approved if it did not even meet minimum standards? So NEMA, as the overall environmental, institution having oversight in the country, needs to ensure that we have competent environmental assessment done, competent strategic environmental assessment done. That is one. Two, if we look at the large-scale developments, we have the southern bypass that has cut through Nairobi National Park. The railway has halved a bit of the park. If you go to Hell's Gate National Park, where we are having geothermal power development, we are actually turning Hell's Gate National Park into an industrial park. Developments where government is largely involved and taking the lead are the ones that seem to abuse grossly environmental requirements. If it was a private investor, and the private investor was not going to pass development through Nairobi National Park, but government, because of having this privileged position, instead of leading the example in terms of providing options for these large-scale developments, government seems to lead actually in failing to provide options for sustainable development. We have hired about 200 acres from Nairobi National Park by government. We are turning Hell's Gate into an industrial park. So what we want to see, okay, this balance between development and conservation. There are tools that can enable us to ensure that development is sustainable. Land use, planning, competent environmental and impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment, and being able to come up with effective environment and environmental management plans which are enforced and implemented. Then we will not have a legacy where we are leaving a lot of environmental mess to our children to clean later on.
Maybe you can also add on that.
I think the first thing that we need to address as a country, as much as we need development, of course there are some systems that have been put in place very long time ago, some strategic plans that have been developed to ensure that both do well, or go well. Conservation and development, because we can't do without development. We need to develop as a country. But number one thing that we need to fight, and I want to second my friend, is corruption. Corruption has led to the undermining of all these plans. Like he mentioned, EIAs. There is an EIA. I'll make an example of an EIA that was done. EIA is the environmental impact assessment that was done for the bypass to cut into the park, and then again another EIA for the SGR to go through the park. So it was, I've not gone through the whole EIA report, but I've read some part of it. It was by far not anything to go by. Of course, it highlighted issues that doesn't at all allow the southern bypass. But then it's edited. It's edited to fit in and to make sure that the developers and whoever takes place. Look at Olkaria, for example, what he just said. The initial plan was to have just Olkaria 1, 2, and 3 in just next to the park. What happened is that the country is doing an ecological valuation, which I don't know, which again, in my opinion, is undermined. And then now they sorted it out that it's required or it's necessary to have Olkaria 4, 5, 6, and 7. All the vultures. Olkaria National Park serves the second home after Lake Kwenya in Magadi for the a species of vultures called the Rupel griffon vultures. It's the second largest home in East Africa. What happens is that the sewer from the Olkaria 5, is now directed to the nest, and all the animals are flying out. All the animals are almost in the extinct list. So I don't know. What we need to think as a country is what do we think? What is the future? What do we take as the future for wildlife? What do we take as the future for natural resources in this country? And this is where again I come to the public opinion. Again, so many issues are going on and the public is not aware. Unless we have a lot of concern from the media, from everybody, to raise up these issues. These things are not known. Unless we bring these things to the light, that's when the public will address. That's when everybody will, have a glimpse of what's going on. People will act on it. So, development and conservation can happen very well if at all we can handle corruption. Yes, that's
right. Of course, now because of time, we just want to get your final thoughts or anything you want to add on the subject. But also, listening to both of you, it's very interesting because if those assessments are done and it is not, I'm sure the leadership is aware of where all these roads are going. Is it that they're not taking action? What do you think should be done then? Because like you said, we still have to get, the SGR is a grand project, a very good project. The bypass is easing a lot of movement. What then should be done? Is it too Is it too late to salvage the situation? And also, as you give your final remarks.
No, it's not too late. It's not to salvage. It's not too late to salvage as for the SGR, there's some options are being weighed, whether to get it around the Ngong area. I don't know the other route. There's several options.
Okay.
But it's only late when we don't act, when we don't come in, when we think he is going to handle it, when you think that Wildlife Direct is going to handle it, but when you have when you're concerned, when you're angry about it, not just angry, you just criticize it positively. Positive criticism is so much welcome in all this, and I think the government can listen and have been listening. So I think it's not too late, and we can still do something about it, not only for the SGR but also for any other development issues. I've heard in the news yesterday that the Webuye pan paper is going to reopen
in the next 3 months.
Yeah. Why was it closed in the first place? Because it had detrimental environmental effects. So looking at it, I don't know what measures they've taken to mitigate what used to be disastrous before, but looking at those kind of trends, we can, learn from our past mistakes and address them. Fine, development is going to happen very well. Pan paper is then allowed to, if they handle the dangerous gases that they use to emit to the atmosphere, and I'm just using pan paper as an example, but if we endorse technology to handle environmental issues, fine. But as for protected areas and natural resources that are a concern and that have been put in strategic plans to remain untouched forever, let's try to avoid this as a country. Let's talk about it. Let's address it. Let's address these issues, because today it's 10 acres for SGR. Tomorrow is another 20 acres for a clinic, and another day another 100 acres for I don't know what. So how long? What do we think as not only as a nation, but as a concerned bodies, NGOs and media houses and all the entities? What do we think? What do we want for this country? What do we want? What is valueless? Let's do our ecological valuation in a very wise way, so that we don't lose it all.
Thank you, Willis. Before I answer your question, let me give the fourth estate, the media, compliment, because I think at the end I may forget. I mean, it's always very easy to complain and spend less time in appreciating. The media has spent a lot of prime time this week and before to sensitize the public, about our natural, heritage, the ban and etc. And I want to sincerely commend the media for dedicating a lot of time, including this morning, to sensitize the public and see what is it that we can do as a country together. Now, have we lost? In some cases, we have lost some space. We have lost some time, but the situation is not so bad as to make it irredeemable. As a country, we actually have, in terms of policies and legislative frameworks, we have, laws that provide for what we need to do in terms of development. Where there is a serious weakness is when it comes to enforcement and compliance. So I want to appeal to all mandated institutions, starting with the NEMA, which is the overall regulatory agency in environmental management, that the law needs to be enforced. If EIAs are required to be conducted, they should not only be conducted on paper, but they should be competent, and that the subsequent proposed environmental management plans effectively implemented. If there's any developer or investor who is polluting our environment, that company or the individual needs to be held accountable. The law provides for what you call even polluter pays principle, and we want to see this being implemented. There are so many developments that are coming into our country, and if we don't, there are things that developers can come and do here that they can't do in Europe or they can't do in other countries, because we are very lax when it comes to enforcement and compliance. If government is strict about the enforcement of our laws and the compliance thereof, then whichever developer comes in here will have to ensure adherence to appropriate environmental and social standards. Secondly, environmental conservation is a multi-sectoral issue, and therefore needs a multi-sectoral approach. There are times when I have engaged with colleagues, even at senior level, in management, in NEMA for instance, and someone tells me, this is being led by another government agency. and I can't go against this. Can you be our voice? What we want to see is close collaboration between lead government agencies in as far as dealing with multi-sectoral issues in environmental conservation are concerned. A few months ago, I went down to Hell's Gate National Park, and I listened to colleagues working, for KWS, and they're lamenting. So they're lamenting, but what they're lamenting for is an action that is being enforced by another sister government institution. So different government agencies speaking at cross purposes. What we want to see is strengthened strengthened efforts in a collaboration, a multi-agency approach. Lastly, in some cases, if we don't act now, we are going to lose a lot of ground. And I want to use two examples as I finish. There were some allegations in media recently that government was likely to hive off 17,000 hectares of Mau forest and give this land, to settle people. We feel comfortable now because the CS, and we have engaged, I was even in our office yesterday, is assuring us that indeed this won't happen. We want to trust the government and take government at their word that they're not going to do another excision of Mau of 17,000 hectares or whatever acreage that is. We can't go back this route. We have appealed to international donors who have given us massive support to conserve the Mau. We can't talk about the excision now. History will judge us very harshly. My last comment. If we look at the situation around Masai Mara, for instance, Masai Mara is the eighth wonder of the world because of the wildebeest migration. It is the leading attraction of safari tourism in the country. But 60% of the animals in the Mara live outside the protected area. A lot of land around Masai Mara is getting into private hands, and people and the Kenyans have this crazy madness about land getting into private hands and being fenced off, and actually limiting wildlife migration corridors and dispersal areas. Last week, I engaged with the CECs from Narok County, and I told them, as leaders, you need to act, and act now. If you don't act in the next 1 year, you are going to lose the character of the Mara forever. Conduct what we call strategic zoning of the land in terms of land use around the Mara, and take a precautionary approach to zone out land which must be for conservation. If we don't do that, we will lose a lot of space. If we act 3 years later, it will be too late. As WWF, we are working with Narok County to support Narok County in spatial planning, which is great, which then will inform, environmental conservation, sustainable development, and etc. But before the spatial plan is completed, we need to take some precautionary measures to mitigate this problem of private land acquisition, fragmentation, and the fences, that are coming up around the reserve. I think working together with concerted efforts, I'm optimistic that we will have a bright future that will have assumed a sustainable development, and we can bequeath this to our children.
One last comment, Willis.
Very briefly then.
Yes. What my parting shot at this is an appeal to the communities that is living with the elephants, or with wildlife generally. It's better off to have, even though we have a lot of human-wildlife conflicts, it's better off to have wildlife than not to have wildlife at all. So I know that there is a very big, community goodwill to give land and to give space, but the law has provided a very clear strategy of how they are going to do the same and benefit from the same. So let's keep on the goodwill. Let's keep on registering our lands for community conservancies and provide more space. Like he mentioned, and it's for a fact, it's 80% of the time in the wild, animals, wildlife spent within the community ranches. So I strongly urge the communities to not give up. The compensation scheme and structure is going to take place very soon, because we have now a very big committed team from KWS, and of course Judy Wahungu has been very instrumental. And let's keep on providing space. Space is the #1 thing for conservation, then the rest will follow.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're talking to Jared Bosire, who is the conservation director at WWF, and Robert Kai, who is the manager of community projects at Wildlife Direct, are talking about the giant summit that's happening tomorrow, and of course they put a lot of matters in perspective. It's a conversation we'll continue having after, and like they both mentioned, it is important to continue to have this conversation even after tomorrow's historic event. All right, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time with us.
Right
now we're going to take a short musical break. We want to go to, we are very honored to be hosting Atemi, and she's here. She's going to belt out some amazing tunes for us. So over to you, Atemi. Good morning.